And that's why we're really excited to welcome Ryan here today in Blackhall Studios for an announcement that I think all of you will be thrilled to hear. So I'm going to welcome Ryan up to come.
Good to see you. Well, I thank you guys for being here today. We're not going to stay a long time, but it's important that we get together because I want to be able to announce that we're going to start a streaming service here in Atlanta called Blackhall Americana. And Blackhall Americana is really focused on action-adventure in its television streaming and action-adventure in the film. Everything is going to be released on the streaming service itself, so it'll be exclusive content. It's going to take us about a year to make the content, and we will stream our first content in Q1 of 2023. The reason we can do this in Georgia is because there's so many qualified bodies that can help us make this content. There's so much quality infrastructure that allows us to be in a position to be able to launch a company like this and have it based here in Georgia. We couldn't have done this 15 years ago. Really, it's only been 7-8 years that Netflix showed us that you can totally disintermediate the Hollywood distribution model and still have success as an entertainment company. 7-8 years ago, we wouldn't have had enough trained bodies in the state of Georgia to make the kind of content that we want to make. Thankfully, Disney's been here making a lot of content. Sony's been here, Warner Brothers, Netflix, Amazon. All of the major production companies have been in Georgia now for almost 2 decades, but really in earnest in the last decade. And that decade of production has trained a workforce for us that puts us in a place where we're now ready to have our own production companies, have our own streaming service, have our own capital, and be able to utilize all of this wonderful infrastructure. So that's what we're endeavoring to do. What'll happen over the next, hopefully 7 years, we follow a trajectory that's like Netflix. So 8 years ago, Netflix didn't make any content. And they took a big risk, and they made House of Cards and Orange is the New Black. And that really launched them and put them on a trajectory that today they make $15 billion a year worth of content. So we're starting from zero, and our hope is that in 7 years we're making $4 billion a year worth of content, which $4 billion is the amount that was made in Georgia last year by all the production companies who came to visit us to use Georgia as a manufacturing hub. So I think that growth is achievable. We're going to start out by raising about $300 million. I think that'll take us until the first quarter of next year. We'll then start production, and we'll be ready to stream our first content in the first quarter of 2023. So with that, I think we'll open it up to questions, but I think that's a pretty good foundation for you guys.
Okay, we can take questions from the audience or the media, and if you don't have any, I will get started, and you can chip in along the way. Ryan, this is your first new venture since you sold the studios. Why have it be a streaming service?
Well, I'm an entrepreneurial personality, and I'm looking for opportunities in whatever industry I'm working in. And Blackhall Studios really gave me a foundation to spend 6 years on the inside of Hollywood, watching it from the inside out. And I just see a tremendous opportunity to deliver in the action-adventure space to meet, I think, a latent demand that's not understood and not enough supply of that kind of content. So it's really a market play. It's really an opportunistic play in looking at this moment in time where for 100 years Hollywood totally had a stranglehold on distribution, and now the internet and Netflix has changed that. And so we're not dependent on going through Hollywood to be able to distribute content anymore. And that creates a massive opportunity for a disruptive entrepreneur.
Is there room for another streaming service in the marketplace?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you look at the streaming services today, they're all located in the same geography, right? These are all California companies. Oftentimes they're hiring back and forth amongst themselves. And so culturally they start to blend together in a way that I think has them really focus on particular genres of content while ignoring other genres of content. And so that creates an opportunity in the marketplace to go and meet demand that's unmet.
Sir, what exactly is going to separate Blackhall Americana from someplace like Netflix? How is it going to be different?
Well, the ways that it's going to be different is when you think about the entertainment landscape today, there's a lot of philosophy involved. There's a lot of sociology involved. There's a lot of politics involved. I mean, the things that Netflix is facing right now, an entertainment company is being, given a really hard time about the kind of content they're creating, right? So I think that there's the primary thing that we're going to do that's different is we're going to not allow philosophy, sociology, and politics to be the driver of what we're making. We're going to focus purely on old school, just entertainment that is intended to be a mind break, an opportunity to really just indulge and check out and enjoy. And I think some of that that kind of entertainment is not being focused on today.
So is that where the name Americana comes from? So when I think of Americana, I think of shared experiences, shared values, shared moments in pop culture and time that bring us together. So when you talk about no politics and no sociology involved, is the goal of Americana to be a place where people can go to really reconnect as a society with that shared entertainment experience?
I think that's fair. When I think of Americana, part of the reason why I chose that name was that the movies and the television that I love generally has themes that I think of as quintessentially American themes. So things like courage and self-determination, ingenuity, and an unwillingness to give up whatever the cost, particularly when it relates to freedom or liberty. Those are the kind of stories that I love the most. And I think those are the kind of stories that there's a huge amount of the marketplace that just wants to see and indulge in. And I don't think it's just America, quite frankly. I think Americans love adventure. Americans are risk takers. And not only do Americans love to see stories about adventure and risk taking, the rest of the world, I think, secretly loves it most when Americans embrace their adventure.
Yes, Ryan, you talk about the ecosystem for the movie industry here in Georgia. Can you talk about how Blackhall Americana will fit into that ecosystem and as it relates to the other production houses that are here and where you used to work?
Yeah, so, in Georgia right now, primarily we are a manufacturing hub for entertainment. So all of the studios, Trilith, Tyler Perry, Screen Gems, Third Rail, Atlanta Metro, the list goes on, right? All of these facilities. These facilities are places where you can go as a producer and make your content. But the only way that content's being made is if somebody's funding it. And right now, all of that money comes from California. So the California money decides what's going to be made. Then they send the production company, the team of guys that they hire, they send them to Georgia with that California money. They drop that wonderful California money in our state. We reap all those benefits. But then they take the content that was made here back to California for distribution, and they keep all the profits from that distribution in California. And so the wealth effect is much more impacted, California is much more impacted positively by the wealth effect of entertainment. Whereas Georgia, our effect economically is positive, but it's just not nearly the same kind of multiples that they get in California from that wealth effect. And so when you think about the idea that the physical studios, like Blackhall Studios that I built and sold, that's a physical space where anybody can come and rent it and make that money. The amount of wealth created by Blackhall Studios is this big. The amount of wealth created by a production company like Tyler Perry is then a multiple on that. But the wealth created by something like Netflix or HBO or Showtime or BET is so far beyond. When you think about if we're successful in achieving what it is that I believe we can achieve, then we're going to take $300 million and we're going to turn it into Netflix. Well, Netflix today is valued at $240 billion. Netflix is the size of Home Depot, the size of Coca-Cola. And when you think of the impact that Coca-Cola or Home Depot has had on the state of Georgia, it's astronomical. That kind of wealth effect is what builds universities. That kind of wealth effect is what creates infrastructure. That kind of wealth effect is what allows for professional sports, right? It's the kind of wealth effect that actually makes you an international city like we are today in Atlanta. So I think that, Blackhall Americana if executed and delivered in what I imagine, is going to end up having an impact economically that is on par with Fortune 500 companies.
So one of the big problems that Georgia has is there's a brain drain of talent towards California, and there's traditionally there have been less opportunities here in Georgia. So what kind of opportunities do you feel that you're going to be able to generate to keep people working in Georgia?
Well, when you think back to the ecosystem, the way that entertainment starts out is in development. And development has to do with cultivating ideas. And the way you cultivate those ideas is you first tease them out to a level where you could then write about them on further detail, and then you might hire writers to write a pilot for a show, or you might hire a writer to write a script for a movie. Those writers largely live in California, and they live there because that's where the money is that will pay them to do this kind of work. Once you have that content developed, now you have to start packaging it, right? So you need to attach directors and producers and actors. Well, they all live in California because the people that are packaging, oftentimes the agents or the managers of the production companies, when they're packaging, they want to talk to these people. So they live in an ecosystem where they can talk to each other and meet and greet and put deals together. Once those deals are put together and something gets greenlit, well, then it gets shipped to wherever for manufacturing. But that manufacturing only takes place because something was bundled, something was packaged. And so as we bring capital into this ecosystem on the entertainment side, then we create the environment where agents have something to do, writers have something to do, executive producers, guys who are developing all of this content have something to do here. Whereas right now, because there's almost no capital that's investing on scale into entertainment, this is not a great home for all of that part of the ecosystem. Additionally, on the post-production, which is something I know we want to do more of in Georgia, the post-production, but oftentimes the post-production stays wherever the money is, because the money wants to see that post-production through and wants to see the final product. And so oftentimes the product is brought back to California in this case. Whereas here, when Blackhall Americana is based here in Georgia, then we'll have a reason for all of that post-production to also base itself here. And so I think you get a massive development on the pre-production side and massive development on the post-production side. And wonderfully, we already have the infrastructure and the trained bodies for the actual physical production side.
The Netflix founder has made it clear that he considers video games to be his primary competition now. And Netflix is investing a great deal of money now in their own gaming division. How long till we get that announcement from Blackhall Americana?
Well, you can only bite off so many things at a time. And so while I too believe that there's a huge opportunity in the gaming world, we're not in that position. We're not in the position to comment yet as to when we could ever get into gaming. There's certainly a lot of talent here for it, so that's wonderful.
So going forward, assuming your projections are accurate, how does one, thank you, how do you, when you get to that size and society has its effect, how do you sidestep the issues that you were talking about earlier that Netflix has to avoid the political?
Well, I think you just have to embrace the fact that if you're going to create an ecosystem where you let creatives run free and really stretch their legs, they're going to have some issues. And you have to decide whether or not you're going to be a police force on your creatives or whether or not you're going to let your creatives exercise their imagination. And I think part of the big opportunity is that Hollywood today has chosen to not necessarily let their creatives run free and use all of their imagination, and that's actually frustrating to a lot of creatives. I get a lot of calls from friends who are writers, directors, producers about all the layers of bureaucracy that they face today. And this is where opportunity is often born in industry. When bureaucracy builds up, then there's opportunity to then create a world where there's less bureaucracy and attract that talent. And so I think from the beginning, we just have to take the position that we're not in charge of all our creatives, and that we actually want to know what the creatives think and what they want to express, and we're going to let them do that.
If you're going to focus on original content, is there going to be a library of existing content as well?
Well, out of the gate, we're not going to have any library. I'm not going to say that we might never buy some library or lease some library. But our goal, and our thesis behind this, is that all of the streaming companies were largely built by a handful of great shows. So just even though Netflix today makes $15 billion a year worth of content, I really think that Netflix was built on 4 great shows. Now, I have friends who wrote other shows who always argue with me about this, but I think the 4 shows that really built Netflix were House of Cards, Orange is the New Black, Stranger Things, and Ozark. I think that that's why I still keep my Netflix subscription, is because of Ozark. Like, I want to see the next season of that. And I think there's a lot of people like that they may watch the stuff in between, but I think it's really the core stuff that keeps us. I kept my HBO subscription for a long time because of Game of Thrones. I wasn't sure why I kept it other than that. I mean, there's some other great shows on HBO, but I was watching them incidentally while I waited for the next installment of Game of Thrones. I think if you go through and you analyze the reasons why you collectively subscribe to different streaming services, it's often for these 1 or 2 shows that you love the most. And so I think that we can, even without a big library, come out of the gate, and as long as we make great content that's compelling for people, we don't have to make a lot of it, and we can have a lot of success.
Isn't action adventure kind of a niche genre? Can you attract a broad audience with a niche genre?
I mean, it is a niche genre, but at the same time, if you look back at like the highest grossing films of all time, most of them are action adventure. I think that it's an underserved niche. I think that there's a huge amount of the population that would like to watch action adventure all the time. And I know I'm one of those. Like, if I could watch Rambo and Commando and Platoon and all of these, genres that are everything from pure military to John Wick, I'd watch a lot more of that. But if you start watching that, you run out of content real fast. And so I don't think I'm the only one who feels that way. And so I think that's where the opportunity is born. It's interesting you say that. I think of, there is some aspect that would make you think that this was a male genre, but you would also think of like professional sports maybe as a male genre. But when I go to the Braves game, it feels like half the people there are women, and they're there for a reason that might be different reasons than the reason the men are there. But I think this kind of content's the same. I think action adventure is something that's broadly appealing both to men and women. So I don't think it's limited.
In terms of the business plan, you plan for it to be a subscription streaming service. And you mentioned all the streaming services that we have now. They have had a blockbuster. They've had a big hit. Tell me how you're going to solve the problem of being able to launch a streaming service and not yet have any content. I mean, I know you'll have content, but you won't have a hit.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, a large part of the belief in this adventure is going to be that we can create content that's compelling. Now, the big advantage we have over the existing streaming companies, when you think about Disney, Disney's 100 years old. When you think about Warner Brothers, they've got the same issue. Netflix started out in a totally different strain of its company and then morphed into what it is today. But all of these companies have fully baked valuations as stabilized assets. Now they're trying to grow, but they're trying to grow from a base of 240 billion or 300 billion into something bigger. We, on the other hand, are starting from scratch. And the beautiful part about that is that I can bring in actors and directors and producers who are hugely talented and who make tens of millions of dollars for the things that they do. But I can offer them positions that put them in a place where if Blackhall Americana is as successful as I imagine it will be, they might make hundreds of millions of dollars. They might become billionaires because of that. And so that's an advantage of a startup, is the ability to be able to offer pieces of a company to highly talented people and give them a lot more upside than what they can get when they're dealing with fully baked companies.
Can you give us an example of the kind of talent the type of talent that you would anticipate working with?
Well, I mean, these are going to be the usual suspects on many levels. We'd love to go and talk to all the guys that are making all the coolest stuff today and give them an opportunity to make stuff where they can own a piece of the platform too. So, I'm a huge fan of what I've watched Ryan Reynolds do, not only on the screen, but then off screen with all the marketing that he's done. I think it's incredible. I'm a huge fan of Quentin Tarantino. I think that he makes content that is different than anybody else. I would love to have somebody like Quentin involved. You look at the flexibility and variability of Dwayne Johnson. You know, Dwayne is an incredibly capable guy, but you look at him entrepreneurially, and he's out, you know, starting tequilas and owning pieces of ice cream, and he's using his platform to create wealth that goes way beyond just the work he does on screen. And so these kind of personalities that have that kind of vision, I think, are the kind of people that we'd like to have involved.
Can you give us an idea how you plan to roll out the original content? Like at launch, how many programs would you have, and after the first year, second year, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so based on this thesis that that streaming platforms are largely built on the core audience of the best shows, then what we're planning to do is make 8 pieces of content. So we'll make 4 streaming television shows that'll each be 10 episodes. So we'll have 40 episodes of television that are 4 series, and then we'll make 4 movies. And we will release those every Friday night. There will be a new episode at 5 o'clock, and then people have all weekend to watch what they're going to watch. And we're going to do that every week, and that's going to allow us to have 44 weeks of content. We'll release 1 series in the first quarter of 2023. At the end of that quarter, we'll release a movie, and then we'll do the same thing again, and we'll do that 4 times. And at the end of that, we need to end up with a minimum of 2 million subscribers, and that would let us do that perpetually if we had 2 million subscribers. Now, I believe we're going to blow right through 2 million subscribers. And if we get to 5 million, we're in a really, really great spot. If we get to 10 million, we might think about going public, because at 10 million subscribers, which is not a lot of bodies really, that's over $1 billion in revenue, and it puts us in a place where then we could just decide how quickly we wanted to grow from there.
AT&T decided to spin off Warner Media and merge with Discovery. Isn't that a sign that a streaming service, even for a big company like that, can end in failure?
Well, there's no doubt that anytime you undertake something new, and you undertake something that's big, and you undertake any sort of adventure that has risk, then you can end in failure. And so this is no different. At the same time, I think that in a world where entertainment as we know it is 100 years old, you have to look at a world where really all the original entrepreneurs are dead. And so now all of the companies are run by managers that have inherited those keys one generation after the next. And in environments like this, there's always opportunity for massive disruption. And we've seen that in the automobile industry. We look at the tech industry today, and it's thriving and it's innovative. But that's because all the original entrepreneurs are still alive and they have lots of money. And so they can throw money at things in a visionary way that is different than other industries that have lost, that the entrepreneurs are dead. So what I see with that kind of a merger is that big bureaucratic institutions have a hard time being nimble enough to create new opportunities like this in a scalable way. And so that's where a lot of the opportunity for this is born, is from bureaucratic failure.
Do you have any other questions from the audience? Do you know how much you plan to charge per month? Have you nailed it?
Yeah, we're going to charge $9.99. We think it's kind of a standard rate, and I think it's the kind of rate that people can feel really good about what they're getting in return. Any other questions?
How about Georgia content providers? Will there be an avenue for them to really be able to not just get first dibs, but have a platform to be able to share their skills and the content that they can create, so we can start to elevate our content creators as well?
Well, when you think about starting something of this scale, it's kind of like starting a professional sports team. So when you start a professional sports team, you don't say, I'm only going to take talent from the local area. You say, I'm going to go get talent from wherever. I'm going to integrate that talent into this geography, and I'm going to make them part of our culture. So Matt Ryan is part of our culture, but he didn't grow up in Atlanta. And I think of the creative talent in the same way. If we can get homegrown talent that can play in the big leagues, well then absolutely, we love to see that, and that's fun. But if you can't get homegrown talent that can play in the big leagues, then you got to bring the big leagues to your house.
The 30% tax credit in Georgia helped build the film industry that we know now to a $4 billion direct spend industry. Are you reliant on that to go forward?
Well, I mean, listen, the tax credit has been hugely helpful, obviously, in building this whole industry. It will be hugely helpful to us too, because we're starting from zero, so it lets us really stretch our capital. At the same time, the way we're building this model is to not be dependent on the tax credit. And that's because the tax credit is really government controlled. It's a government decision, and we don't want to be in a place where we're totally dependent on our existence for that tax credit. So while it's incredibly helpful, I don't believe that it's part of our long-term model to be reliant on the tax credit.
Do you have a headquarters here, or are you looking to establish a headquarters in Atlanta?
Yeah, we have a piece of land that we've identified. I can't tell you where it is yet, but we are in the process of purchasing a building that will become the headquarters for Blackhall Americana. Other questions?
How many jobs, corporate-wise, at your brick-and-mortar building do you think it'll build for the Georgia economy?
Well, you want to break it down into two groups. You got your pre-production, kind of permanent jobs that people come to the same office all the time. I think out of the gate in the first year, we probably end up with about 100 of those, right? Maybe 100 be the max. Over time, that's going to grow. So you think about like Netflix headquarters in LA, it's 10,000 people plus. On the production side, every production you make takes about 300 bodies to make a television show or a movie. And so if we're making 8, then that first year we're going to employ probably about 2,500 people. But then when you think about our growth, right, if we're going from making 250 million of content in year 1 to twice that, to twice that, to twice that, pretty quickly you're employing tens of thousands of production jobs.
The 300 million that you plan to raise, why that figure, and what if you fall short of 300 million?
So, 300 million is the number that we know is a great number for us to be able to have plenty of money for overhead, plenty of money for marketing, and enough money to make high quality programming for 8 big programs. We could bootstrap it at about 200 million. So 200 million is kind of our minimum to make it go. My guess is it's actually going to get oversubscribed, so we'll probably end up with a little bit more than 300. But 300 is a great number to come out of the gate and know that we can do everything we want to do.
Good. Sir?
Do you think in maybe the waning era of COVID, it'd be harder to raise, or maybe that would actually have a reverse effect and be easier to get subscribers to get this off the ground?
I think this is COVID indifferent, actually. I mean, certainly COVID's been an incredible time for entertainment, driving entertainment forward, a lot of entertainment spend. I mean, basically every soundstage in the English-speaking world is full right now with people making content. But because we're playing into a niche that I think is massively underserved, I think that was true before COVID. And while I wasn't in a position to try to meet that demand because I had other obligations, I had other endeavors, post the sale of the physical studio, it really frees me up to then go chase this niche and meet the demand that I see in the world on a scale that I think is pretty cool.
Do we have any other questions? Okay, I want to thank everyone for attending. Thanks to everyone watching on the live stream, and have a great day.
Thank you guys for coming.